Here is another session from the series Defense Against Dark Act. We are focusing on developing the knowledge, awareness, mental readiness to prepare our own protection shields against these frauds and intruders. In this session, we'll be discussing about job scams. These job scams in recent times have caused significant anxiety, distress, financial losses to a large percentage of our younger generation. Let us look at how these job scams are usually being carried out. So, the modus operandi is usually like the fraudsters establishing a communication channel with uninformed people who are potentially looking for jobs. They pose as recruiters for attractive jobs and develop a suitable scenario for potential victims, uses fake data to make the job prospects sound authentic, and as a natural reaction, the people, responds with excitement, with the prospect of gain, and they apply for the job. As a response to that application, the fraudsters ask to sign employment agreement and send a set of legal documents. In haste, uh, the potential victim signs the legal documents and send back. Then fraudsters, works in multiple different ways. Some of them ask the potential victims to download an application. In some other scenarios, they may ask to pay a fee for employment contract processing or visa processing as mandatory steps for the jobs. Whichever way they are trying to trap the victim, they definitely create a certain sense of urgency in their communication. And the victim, in haste, either install the apps and the app steals all personal and confidential data, or they pay the fee as asked and end up becoming a victim of job fraud. And it doesn't usually end there. In many of these cases, fraudsters throws an unemployability reason and terminates the contract as per already signed legal agreements and impose a penalty as already provisioned in the contract. And victim suffers from greater consequences because of this. Let's understand what could be a counter strategy for this. So the situation, goes like same fraudsters establishes a communication channel with the potential victim. They pose as recruiters. They lure the victims towards a uh, authentic sounding job prospect, and the informed people, they, of course, while the excitement being the natural reaction, they also uh, get involved into doing a situation analysis. They respond with cautious optimism and ask to provide employment contracts and other legal documents to review and to understand if there are any system or device software requirements that they should be aware of. Now, in such cases, the fraudsters will perhaps might just send the employment contracts or legal documents, other software requirements, and if they do, again, another round of situation analysis will be needed. from the informed people, and they should respond with level headedness and clarity of thoughts to validate the situation. And during this time, fraudsters will create a sense of urgency. They will ask people to sign up urgently or lose the opportunities. And this is where, it will require people to decide the course of actions diligently. They would need to decide the course of actions, communicate as much needed, and break off for further offline validations. These are the steps, these are the necessary amount of due diligence that one has to do to make sure that he or she is not becoming a victim of job scams. Now, let's get into the details of these situation analysis areas and the due diligence areas for deciding the course of actions. Now, let's understand if there is a situation where a potential recruiter is asking to install an application in the applicant's mobile device to continue with the application process. Now, a few things you must be aware of. Usually, recruiters and employers will have their websites, and all necessary employee specific information can be provided in such sites. Downloading an application for a job should be avoided unless it is mandatory. Now, if downloading an application and installing it in personal device is mandatory for continuing the job application process, you need to ensure that application is certified by Android Marketplace, Apple Marketplace. There are sufficient number of users who have used the app, and users of applications have given note feedback on security issues for the app. If the job applications requires the prospective employee to carry on a certain duration of internship or probation, where the person is supposed to work on given assignments, it is recommended to check if work profile setup is possible in personal device that needs to be used. So usually the work profile setup should be done as per work contract or temporary contract. Now, how does the work profile looks? You can see it in the slide here. Usually when a work profile is set up, let's say this is a screen from Android device, you will see a tab like personal where all your applications running on personal space will be shown up here. And then you will see another tab as work profile, and all applications relevant for work profile will show up like that. So once you click on work, it will highlight it like this, and applications for work will show up here. This is the usual way to use the personal device for work profiles. Now, you can never be sure whether the employing organization have the necessary licenses for such work profile setup or not. Sometimes, these facilities are not provided to part-time employees. In such cases, best practice is to use a completely separate mobile handset and number and use it for only work purposes. Without this, if an application is downloaded and installed in the personal mobile, in the personal space of the mobile, only a mobile device security expert can suggest whether the app has gained undue access to personal data or not. Now, uh, you have, if you're setting up a work profile like this, usually this will ensure that the data separation is in place. So if work profile setup is allowed, you'll probably not have to worry too much about the data separation and other things because those will be taken care of by this setup itself. And this is this provision is available in both Android and Apple iOS. In Android, it's called Android Work Profile. In Apple, it's called Apple iOS Business Containers. Essentially, this will ensure the data is separated. But again, if that provision is not there, you should try and follow the best practices as described here. Now, let's take a look at another situation where uh, the potential recruiter is asking to pay a fee to continue with the job application process. Now, usually a recruiting company would not ask for payments as a fee for processing the job applications from the candidate. They usually receive payments from employing companies. But under special circumstances, if the recruitment company is asking for payment for processing job application, should be mutually negotiated in a manner that the payment is only payable once the candidate gets the job and receives the salary. Preferably, the payment should be identified as a percentage of salary for a defined number of months, only when salary is credited. If the job application requires certain logistics handling, such as visa processing or insurance processing, and if the recruiting company is supposedly taking care of the same, there could be a scenario of payment from candidates as a service cost of these logistics handling. While progressing on these job applications, you will need to clarify from the recruiting companies whether it is mandatory to take these services from the company itself, or it can be carried out by involving someone from your known circle separately. Like, for example, if you have to process a visa, if you have to apply for a visa, uh, if all documentations are available, if everything is given to you, might as well um, reach out to a travel and logistics company who are proficient in processing visas for the specific countries. Similarly, insurance, if something certain type of job profile requires you to purchase an insurance, you might as well reach out to an insurance company and purchase it separately once the necessary documentations are available, provided whatever necessary documentations are needed from employing organizations that has to be provided to you, and your own documentations will have to be part of it as well. So essentially, irrespective of which particular company is carrying this out, whether it's the recruiting company or you're employing or you're engaging a third party, you will have to have your own research on the specifics of logistics and associated fees as charged by other entities, similar kind of processing uh, when it is done by other companies. You'll have to have your own research on that. You'll have to know how much it really costs. Now, from visa processing perspective, so for most of the countries, work visa processing requires work contract with an employer in the visiting country, proof of financial means for candidate, travel and health insurances, and sometimes ticket booking and accommodation, etc. So work visa can be applied by candidates as long as he or she is in possession of all these documents. And it is recommended to receive documents like work contract directly from employer company via company emails of legitimate HR representative of the employing company. And signature authority of the company also should be verified offline to ensure accuracy. So whenever you are receiving documents from the employing company, you must emphasize to receive those over emails. And in this series, there is a session that kind of describes how to validate an email. So if you go and watch that particular content, you will be able to understand the way how you can validate a particular email has come from the legitimate company domain or not. Now, regarding the visa processing, sometimes there could be requirements of showing the proof of financial means for candidate, certain proofs of personal finances, or proofs of personal sponsors in the visiting country might have to be shown. It varies from country to country. A logistics company specialized in work visa processing can guide these aspects better. You should feel free to get engaged with one such company to have a full understanding of necessary requirements for work visa processing. In fact, even for travel and health insurance, the requirements vary from one country to another. And usually, the particular embassy's visa processing website describes the specific requirements clearly. So you can actually search and find out the details from embassy's websites as well. You need to be fully aware and you should verify each and every details of work visa related documentations and make sure you are not mentioning anything inaccurate there because mentioning inaccurate details in work visa applications could be considered as a legal offense. To carefully review each and every details, you should never allow others to fill in those details for you. Now, let's also understand few general aspects of situation analysis on some of these considerations when you're having a situation like these. A job is being offered and you're kind of um, trying to validate if the job offers is legitimate or not. So India's Employment Act and labor law protect employees' interests who are based out of India. Now, if the contract is getting signed between parties in given context may or may not be fully in compliance with Indian Employment Act and labor laws, or comes with under a different purview of the same, then it will have to be considered differently. Before signing a legal document, it is recommended to have this reviewed by a legal expert, a lawyer, so that all clauses and compliances are properly understood. In case of remote employment, work from home, it becomes important to understand which company is recruiting and under which company's payroll the candidate will be onboarded, and how the legal contracts are established among these different parties. From legal perspective, not all employing companies may have their presence in India. So they may attempt to onboard Indian talent through their Indian partner companies. Now, Indian partner companies can onboard talent from India on behalf of an employing company established in foreign countries, but it is necessary to understand the legalities around it. What kind of legal documents are executed, are going to be executed between the employee and the Indian company and between the employee and the foreign company, and which country's jurisdiction will cover what. It's also important to understand if there is any tri-party agreement that is getting executed or not involving the company, the Indian recruiting company, and the foreign employment company. So, given all this information, when you're actually in the process of validating the prospect, the job offer, you need to assess the genuineness of the scenario. And if you if you are being suspicious about this and if it appears to be a uh, fraudulent, attempt, might as well have to figure out the extent of data breach, extent of information that the fraudulent party has already acquired. Should ask documentations about employing companies, website, publicly disclosed business profile, where registered, which country and location where employee needs to reside, the nationality of employed people. In the current situation, current strength, whoever are already employed with the organization, which nationality they're from. Financial stability, yearly turnover, growth prospect. So there's a lot of these data. If it is a public company, for sure you will have these details available over website. If it is not, you must also at least make an attempt to get this data. And if you're getting it, it should give you some idea of how the economical situation of the company is looking like. And you should also ask about the customers, companies, customers, who are they and what kind of business are they doing? Now, on a different aspect, you should also ask documentations about job roles, the responsibilities, the skill requirements, and you should ask why the recruiter feels that your profile will match the requirement, in which public job site the jobs are being advertised. Then you should also ask about the working hours, the leaves, the holidays, uh, kind of tools used, for uh, you know, for for uh, logging into these details, the working hours, or applying for leaves. What kind of necessary level of software compliances that needs to be maintained by you when you're working for the company, and what kind of device support will be provided from companies. Will it offer you a laptop? Will it offer you a mobile handset specifically for official purposes? So some of these information will usually be part of the policies, the HR policies or the IT policies, and you will have to have a view of that. If not the whole policy document, at least you will have to have a view of how these policies are usually worked out in the particular organization. And uh, you should also have a view of the admin policies, training policies, separation policies. What are the ways, what kind of separation policies are followed if you have to resign from the organization at a certain point? What are the necessary clauses that you should be aware of? Now, in addition to that, you should also ask details of the people, the particular agency that you're currently engaged with, and who are they, in what role they're discussing this prospect with you. Are they the recruiting company, or are they the mediator company, or uh, if they are the mediators, who are the original companies, or what kind of original companies hiring these mediators? You should ask more details around that as well, and try and make sure that you're doing most of these communications either over mails, and you have a way to validate the authenticity and the legality of the mails. And if not mails, if you're uh, doing these discussions over calls, you should try and take these calls over mobile phone, and try avoid as much of app-based voice and video calls as possible. Now, as a next step, if you have to decide the course of action, I mean, consider a situation where the situation analysis that you have carried out has given you a sort of a mixed feedback, a mixed feeling, that, not still sure about the legitimacy of this job, the prospect of it. you need to decide the next course of actions, and you need to, you know, keep few things in mind. So there are several websites available which captures the employee's review on the employer, including remote employees. The same needs to be checked. So you need to check on those websites what are the feedback given to this particular employer by the employees. What are the positives that are mentioned? What are the negatives that are mentioned? And if you don't find anything about this employer, that again raises a flag. Secondly, you need to, understand the entire set of legal documents and contracts that you are going to be signing off. It needs to be thoroughly reviewed, and it all involves the company's roles and responsibilities, towards you as well. It needs to be clearly understood in the context of employment. And if you are not sure about these things by yourself, you should definitely try and appoint a lawyer who can validate the legal situation. Um, Particularly for employment-specific legal documents that comes under the jurisdiction of foreign country, careful legal review becomes important due to the upsurge of cases where persons hired from one country to another country have been forced to get involved in criminal activities as part of the job. While Indian embassy can always be contacted to get help in abroad for such cases, it's also important that before signing up for those jobs, you are doing a critical review and you're essentially looking at the legal documentations carefully and you're safeguarding your own interest. The software requirement expectations, especially when personal devices are expected to be used, whether it's a mobile or a laptop, it requires to be carefully evaluated. This may require an IT subject matter expert's involvement if required. You might as well, try evaluating it yourself. But if you're not sure, you might, just engage a IT subject matter expert who can take a better um, call in terms of the legitimacy of the request that you're receiving from the potential employer. Now, if you're suspecting a fraud communication, you should know that there is a provision in Government of India's Sanchar Sathi portal, Chakshu portal. You can uh, provide the information of the number from which you're receiving these fraudulent communication, and it will also trigger an independent validation of the same by involving the relevant telecom operators. So, in summary, no matter how difficult the situation may appear, um, the situation analysis is always somewhat difficult. It's not so easy to get a complete clarity on the legitimacy of the situation that you're currently in. But if you can keep your mind centered and keep a check on your emotions, there should be enough pointers around you that can help you to get a hold of the situation and protect your interest. You need to stay observant, you need to stay centered, and to keep your shields up. That's kind of it for this session, but we'll be coming with more recommendations and suggestions of different attacks. And stay tuned.